Hi, Craig. How's it going?
Good. How are you, Sad?
Good, good. So, quick little intro. This is Craig from Inverted Ventures, based out of Alberta, Canada. Craig is a family office, um, and he is also in a phase which is unique in converting into what is going to be a traditional VC fund, focus on managing outside capital towards some very specific types of ventures. So, we'll get into all of that, but before we start, Craig, let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself. First about you, and then we can go into the family office stuff later on.
For sure. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Inverted Ventures. We call it Inverted Ventures is one of our arms in the family office. We call ourselves the Inverted Group of Companies, different companies within. My background is actually I was a chef for 24 years before doing this with the family. Um, I'm sure a lot of you are asking, okay, what's a chef doing running a venture capital firm?
Oh, we talked about this. We're gonna get dive into that big time.
um, yeah, I guess, I grew up here in Calgary. I was born in Toronto. We moved to Calgary when I was 9. My whole life, since I was probably 10, 11, I knew I wanted to be a chef. And I molded my schooling and my skill set, everything to get to there. Went to culinary school. When I was 14, I opened my own investment portfolio. I've always been ingrained in like finance and wanting to grow my wealth. And growing up, my family at least, my mom and dad were not well off. We were pretty poor. So I always wanted to, take whatever little money I could earn and invest into things or grow it. I remember, buying chocolate bars for 25 cents at Costco and then selling them for 75 cents to a buck at school. Like it was always grinding, always doing things like that. So I started investing in stocks, opened a TD Waterhouse account, grew that from $20 to 45,000, something like that over, multiple years. And I always talked to my uncle. My uncle was in oil and gas. We always talked about business and things like that. He was really the only business minded person in the family, and he kind of understood what I was doing and what I was trying to build. Then I started, focusing on schooling and going to work as a chef. I'm really good with numbers. There's just one thing that I really know about myself: good with math, good with numbers, good with realizing trends, things like that. And when I was with Marriott, I started working in the banquet kitchen and started doing mass volume cooking. So doing parties for 5,000 people, doing dinners for plated dinners, 2,000 people, things like that. And that's very numbers driven. And the higher ups saw that I was really good with numbers. So they started getting me to go to different properties around North America and help other chefs who aren't good with numbers. Inherently, chefs we're great at making good food, but we suck at numbers. And I had both going for me. So I would go to different properties, help them with their foods, help them with their numbers, help them with staff engagement. And I really learned how to run a business and run operations working for Marriott. And then, fast forward to 2019, my uncle and my cousin started Inverted Ventures. They kind of asked me, hey, do you want to come aboard and do some stuff with us and do some due diligence? Because my cousin Nick and I traded stocks when he was a bit younger. Before the legal cannabis market went live here in Canada, there was a lot of stocks that were on the TSX and things like that. And I was already doing research and getting into that, knowing that it was going to be legalized, and the government coming in was saying that they were going to federally legalize.
Right.
So my cousin Nick and I kind of pooled our money together, started doing it, and we ended up 9xing our money, selling the day before legalization happened because we knew that it was going to pop off and then crash. And that's exactly what happened. We bought back at a 40% discount and then made another 40% profit off of that. So it was, we knew we could work together and do things as a family. COVID happened. My cousin, my uncle had to pivot, and then we went into cryptocurrency head first,
Oh,
investing
wow.
into
Okay.
cryptocurrency. And then, yeah, that's like the inception of Inverted Ventures, was that we started really doing research, and they asked me to do the research heavy focused items. And then we grew it what we are today.
So a lot of stuff there, and I want to come back to a few things. But just on the note of what you just mentioned, do you feel that much of the family's capital has been generated in the last, I don't know, let's say decade or so, or has it been mainly because of the oil and gas stuff that your uncle has been involved in?
I would say it's the majority has been from the oil and gas side. That was like, that's the inception of how we were able to do all this. But
Right.
we, in the last 4 years, I would say we have grown that number by about 40%. It's kind of
Wow.
the way
Okay.
I would say that what we've done. We've really taken the time to really do research and grow everything that we've done by about 40%, which is a fairly large number for us.
Very cool. Now, for a lot of our American sort of viewers, let's call it, I don't really call them viewers, engaged investors. The A lot of people don't know that the oil and gas space in Alberta has really just sort of turned upside down. What used to be a thriving economy has now sort of slowed to a halt. So the question is, what was the family's pivot from that sector to, maybe continuing business and operations, and what's been the focus so far from the oil and gas?
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great question. So oil and gas in Alberta has been the lifeblood of this province, and in a way, the lifeblood of the of the Canadian economy for
Yeah.
decades. Um, you know, my uncle was in oil and gas, propane, liquid natural gas sales for
Okay.
quite some time. Then him and his business partner started Factor Gas and Liquids here out of Calgary about 30 years ago, about 28, 30 years ago that they did it. And they were just they traded. They would trade contracts. They would look at futures. They would hedge their bets, and they were like the middleman. They were buying contracts from one place, selling them to another, and they would just use that to generate revenue. It was great. Like you didn't really have to own anything. You just kind of pass things back and forth. My uncle then started investing in real estate and different types of commercial real estate and things like that. And it was a big pivot. Um, for what Alberta looks like now, it's one of those things where you hear a lot of stuff about how oil and gas is, it's dying and it's going to
Yeah.
be, it's just not. It's one of those things that's going to be here for a while because everything that we have that we need, any new green technology that is being developed, the equipment for that green technology needs
Right.
um, oil and gas in order to function and grow. So it's going to be something that's going to be here for a while. It's just going to be weaned down a bit, and I
Right.
think that's fine. I think that needs to happen. My uncle saw that was the case, and then said, okay, his portfolio was very energy focused. And he just said, okay, let's look at more greener things. I've done I've done what I can in this industry. Let's look at some different things that we can invest in. Look at startups. Let's help different founders. He knew that. My cousin Nick worked with a bunch of founders before. He went to Dalhousie University for business school, worked in a few startups, and he understood the world of startups. And
Right.
he said, he was on both sides, fundraising for these companies, but also looking from an investor standpoint and said, well, I think we can do this. There's this area where my uncle didn't need the liquidity today. So venture capital is that longer eyed horizon of 8 to 10 years, 5 to 10 years, let's say,
Right.
investment. You get your liquidity, and that's how my cousin sold it to my uncle. Was let's look at this. It might take us a bit longer to get our money out,
Yeah.
but the returns could be exponential. The returns are going to be much greater than the CIO offering you 8% a year. Like
Right.
this could be something special. So my
Right.
uncle said, "Okay, build it for me," and that's where I came in. Was they're like, "Hey, Craig, you want to build this for us?"
Oh, so they just basically said, we need a new menu and just
Yeah,
go
pretty
for
much, right? Yeah,
it.
we need a different protein on the menu here. Yeah.
So on that topic, look, I mean, I think obviously it's very fascinating. I speak with so many different family offices, the nature of what I do, and I've never come across a situation where a high level executive in a family office, somebody who's really responsible for driving the ship, is coming from an entirely different industry, especially the culinary world,
Yeah.
right? So, and you said something very interesting to me, which I fully agree with. Now, you're a Bengali, right? Your family's from
Yes.
Bangladesh. My family's from Bangladesh. I see this all the time that in the subcontinent of South Asia, where there's so much competition and lack of resources, what tends to happen is that the focus of parents with their children is to teach them technical skills that are surefire ways of getting jobs. So, becoming a doctor, becoming a lawyer, accountant, engineer, all of those things. Entrepreneurship is not something that's taught nor glorified, and it's not something that really exists within the culture. So then the
Yeah.
question is, those that sort of have that entrepreneurial mind despite it being taught to them, how does that develop? How did it develop for you?
It's so funny that because I know our people and there are a few in our family that are like that, where that told
Yeah.
me like, you need to get into computers. Stop this cooking crap. You're going to make $40,000 a year and you're not going to be able to pay a mortgage. And go into
Right.
computers, you'll make 100,000 a year. Like that was the thought process. My
Yeah.
parents were never like that. My parents are do what you love, be happy, marry who you love, be happy. It was one of those. So it was nurtured in me from young, where it was, what do you want to do? And they knew I cooked at home all the time, and I was 8 years old making craft dinner, or itchy bad noodles, whatever it is. And my parents are going, you really like this stuff, and they nurtured it. So they knew that I wanted to do that, and not once did they ever say don't do that. So I think that was there. And then for the family members that were a little bit more forward thinking, like my uncle, um, he nurtured that as well. He was like, okay, if this is what you want to do, do it. But as my parents told me too, do it to
Yeah.
the best of your ability. So that
Yeah.
entrepreneurial standpoint, I don't think my parents would have, if I told them I'm going to start my own business right out of school, they would probably have lost their mind. That would have been the
Yes.
breaking
Yes.
point. But
Yeah.
going for a trade or a career, so I at least knew I had a path, and they knew I had a path that was nurtured. So that was actually very beneficial to my growth, and to be able to do everything. I had the support of everybody I needed to have the support of in order for
Yeah.
myself to go through this process.
Very interesting. So one of my favorite authors is Robert Greene,
Okay.
and one of the books that he wrote is called Mastery. And the whole premise of that book is, somebody goes through, whether it's an entrepreneurship, whether it's through a trade or whatever, or a craft, they go through three different stages. They
Okay.
become a master, but before they become a master, they have to go through this long process of apprenticeship, right? And that really is about observation. That really is about a repetition, right? Getting the reps
Yeah.
in and being able to really just master something within, a couple of thousands of hours of doing it over and over again. So
Yes.
that kind of brings me to the question of you in the kitchen. So you spent a large part of your life in the kitchen. What are some of the skills that you had to develop, which you would then consider transferable into what you do now?
Amazing question, because it's one of the questions that I asked myself over and over and over again when I was asked to come aboard Inverted Ventures with the family and build out the venture portfolio. I'm like, what's
Well,
a guy that,
if I can interrupt you very quickly, one of my
yeah,
specialties is not being the smart guy in the room. Is to ask the smart people the smart questions.
of course, right? That's the best way, right? Um, like I had to ask myself, like, what is a guy that knows how to make a hollandaise sauce doing building a venture portfolio? What is a venture portfolio? What I learned in kitchens, it's amazing. The more I get ingrained in the venture capital world and work with startups and founders, um, they're so paralleled. You know, a kitchen, you're working with a ragtag group of people that are coming and going. You don't have great budgets. You don't have a lot of money. You're under time crunches. You're trying to grow and build this business and make every aspect of what you do better.
Yes.
Then, when you're a cook, you're cooking. You are making 1,000 liters of tomato sauce, or you're grilling 100 steaks, or you're doing that kind of thing. But as you get up the ranks, the higher up you get, the less you cook, and the more it's about
Mm.
operations. And the more it's about numbers, and the more it's about being a psychiatrist and helping your staff and going through their problems, and like, oh, your parents are getting divorced, or you're getting divorced, or and how do you wade this group of people and work your numbers properly and do your budgets right. When you're working for a multi-billion-dollar company like Marriott, I was running a small cog in their wheel. It was still a $25 million food and beverage operation. So that was where it was like, how does a chef get to there? And it's by learning how to do costing and cost analysis, and working with people, how you're engaging your staff. So how do you help the HR side of your startups? And I see these parallels now where it's like, how do you manage costs? Well, I was managing some of the tightest budgets you could think of within a food and beverage operation. How do you manage your time goals? Well, I was managing, okay, we need to feed 5,000 people yesterday. Like, let's get this done. Um, Ordering, like inventory management. That's what so many of these startups don't fully understand, right? How
Yeah.
do you control your costs? And that's what I used to teach my cooks, would be, some of my, you know, uh, chef de parties or sous chefs, they'd order $5,000 worth of potatoes because the potatoes were on sale. They're like, we'll use it. And I'm like, okay, do you do this at home? Can you pay your mortgage with leftover baby creamer potatoes? Like, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, yeah. And if this last 4 weeks, are we serving a 4 week old substandard product because we saved $1,400? Like, what what are we trying to accomplish doing this? And that's what honestly I can bring from an operations standpoint to these companies right now.
It's very fascinating. So, as a venture firm, as you're going towards making investments into venture, you're going to be managing, a portfolio of companies. You're already managing a portfolio of companies that you've invested into. When we met, it was at the family office conference in Montreal. So, I mean, we sat, we talked a lot, and one of the things you mentioned to me, which I still remember very clearly, because I think it was so insightful, is you mentioned that in a kitchen and in business, there are just so many variables that you have to control. And to be able to understand the impact of each variable, you're going to have to be able to isolate it and then tweak it and see the impact that it has and measure that. So how do you do that among all your companies, right? Like, how do you control the variables when there's so many moving pieces at the same time?
I think and that comes with having to do that in my previous career, in
Right.
my previous life, is, you're I had teams of up to or over 100 people. And what I learned coming up, I mean, working, was you can't talk to everyone with a broad stroke. I
Right.
can't talk to Jane the same way I talk to Mark, right? So I'm having the same conversation with potentially 100 people, but I have to say it almost 50 different ways, right? Because I can talk to certain people the same way, and and
Yeah.
and that's what I try and do with our companies. It's juggling. It's looking at the numbers. It's figuring out how they are. One of the things that I think a lot of investors don't do is, we're always asking our startups and our founders, how's the business going? Right? How are sales? How was your month? The first question I ask my founders is, how are you? Like, mentally, how are
Yeah.
you? Are you coping? Because it's a tough world, it's a tough life. And I wish,
Yes,
as
it
a
is.
chef, people ask me that more, right? So that's what
Right.
I'm trying to bring to this is, how are you? The more people know that you care, and they know that we at Inverted, that I, Craig D Cruze, care about them, not about them making me a return. Because if they're
Mhm.
healthy, they're happy, they're taken care of, they're gonna make us a return.
Yeah.
That's going to inherently happen. So I try and bring that level. And I get it. It's another added piece to this
Yeah.
already jumbled puzzle that we have to navigate. But I'm fine with that, because all of these pieces, once they fit together, will make everyone involved successful.
So I think the term to describe what you just mentioned is like sort of like a founder focus. Um, a lot of VCs now, in an attempt to differentiate themselves from the pack, their value add now is founder focus, right? We're not
Yeah.
just investing capital, but we have a suite of services ranging from health to wellness to other things. even financial management of the founder itself, that
Yes.
VCs are now starting to provide. And I think, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is that if you can control the founder, then the founder then controls the rest of the business. And if you can ensure that the health of one, then you ensure the health of the other.
100% agree to that,
Okay.
because and if you can make sure the founder's okay, but even the team that surrounds them, because then ultimately there is a support system for them. It's not just like, okay, I'm fine, but then now I have to
Yeah.
take care of everybody else. It's like, no, like you guys all manage the business. How can we help your team?
Right.
That's kind of the big way. So yes, we're founder focused, but we're very team focused as well. Like, how is this team functioning? It's one of the things we look at when we first invest. It's one of our deciding factors in a way. Is this the right team to take it to a finish line that we set? Not the finish line in terms of exit.
Right.
Sometimes the teams in place aren't going to be the teams that are going to be there at the end. But we're also not going in going, okay, yeah, we're going to have to uproot this entire team, and this isn't the right team. If it's not the right team at that moment of investment, we will not invest,
Makes
no
sense.
matter how good the company looks.
Yeah. Well, the team at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to pull the levers, right? So it's
Exactly.
very important. Okay.
Yeah.
So founder focus is one. You mentioned personality management, dealing with everybody in their own individual way. That's also a big thing.
Yeah.
I don't envy that part. That's the part that I hate the most. Um, uh, and the other thing that I found with founders is that there's just so much happening that founders. I mean, I'm a founder now too, right? So like now it's like
Yes.
we don't stop to smell the roses, but we also don't stop to realize where we are in that point in like, hey, are we too anxious? Are we even functioning at a high capacity, or are we just sort of like moving along the scale? So yeah, that's a very interesting point. I see this more and more. Okay, so you're not done with cooking, even though you're doing something else now. You still take the time to actually do, private sessions and etc.
Yes.
I found your pictures just, invigorating as to how nice they were. So I think as a fun experiment, why don't we talk about, I think that one dinner that you talked about, the one that you did with
Yeah.
your uncle's family.
Yes.
Um, why don't we talk about what the menu was? Because I want people to understand that the things that we talk about and sort of the financial and the family office stuff, that's secondary to what you actually do.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I have my
Walk
own.
walk us through the courses.
Okay, let me pull it up for you.
Okay.
If I have it, that's a good question. I might not have it.
This was an
Um,
Alicia question, by the way. Alicia
was
said
it?
you
Okay,
better
good.
ask.
Alicia sent you
You
that.
you
That's I like
yeah.
this. I like that. Let me actually I can pull up the menu itself on my photos here. And
Nice.
but yeah, so what I do is I try and my business before I was doing this is I have a business that I don't really get to do that much anymore, which is fine. Where I would bring a Michelin star experience to someone's house. So it would be creating food that you would get at one of the nicest restaurants, and I would create the menu, curate it, do everything for it. So give me a second here. I'm sorry. I'm gonna pull this up. Um,
This was a
it
curveball. I totally get it.
This is a curveball, yeah, but it's good. I like curveballs. Just gotta find the pictures. Sorry,
No, don't worry about it. All
but
this
I
all this
try.
little all this little dead time, we'll cut it down. Don't worry.
We'll cut it. Okay, good. It's all pictures of my dog.
That's fair.
Where is it? Sorry, man. I'm just. I have so many food pictures in here. You have no like it's,
Oh, I bet.
but it's of all the places we've traveled and okay, I'm close because I'm at Japan. There we go. where I was there. Where did it go? There we go. Okay. So for this menu, I did an 8 course or 7 course meal with like some amuse bouches and stuff. So it was more of a celebration. It was my uncle and my aunt's uh, 30th year anniversary
Wow.
for their wedding. My um, One of their friends got married the year prior in Europe, in Iceland. So they were doing their 1 year anniversary as well at this. So we kind of did all this stuff together in Kimberly. So one of the amuse bouches was a steak tartare, but it was with the flavors of a really nice vindaloo. So I did like a vindaloo steak tartare with a nice piece of burrata, pickled red onions, tamarind, cilantro, all that kind of stuff. I did a duo of oysters. The first one was like a Nashville hot chicken spiced oyster. It was still raw, but I took chicken skin and did like a Nashville hot spice, crisped up the skin, put that on there, and I did like a grilled pineapple uh like mignonette dressing on it. So you had like the pineapple, the spicy, the chicken skins, you had crunch, and then the nice briny oyster. And then the second oyster I
It's
did,
always about that balance, right?
it is, yeah, sweet, salty, sour, spicy, like everything together, bitter. The second oyster I did strawberries, white balsamic lemon, and a prosecco jelly. So I made like
Ooh.
a prosecco jelly. So you had
Yeah.
that strawberries and champagne type feel to it
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
little bit of white balsamic. So you ate the Nashville one first. You got that spice. You got the kick. You got that tartness of the pineapple, and then you went
Yeah.
into the next one, and it just cleansed your palate. It was really cool. I did the first course after that was a tomato dish where I did tomatoes 7 ways. So it was a tomato tartare, tomato water, dehydrated tomato chips, a tomato dashi gel. There was tomato jello, I called it. It was like jelly cubes
Yeah.
of the tomato water with some basil and some Fresno chili. There was a basil puree and a miso tuile on that. So it was just this beautiful dish of just tomatoes. It was tomato in your face. Really good dish. I did this other dish. It was called I called it the Technicolor crudo. So it was Icelandic husk fish that was flown in the day before from Iceland.
And
That I did,
I think if I remember correctly, you said that there was something significant about this fish.
yeah. So it was from Iceland where the couple got married. So it was
Okay.
just this, like it was there. And then what I did was I put like I wish you guys could see this because it's pretty cool. I have a video on my phone, but it had Asian pear, avocado, serrano chilies, and the thinly sliced pieces of this husk fish in a crudo style. And then I did a butterfly pea flour agua chili. So it's like a broth that has the butterfly pea flour, which is blue. So it's this blue broth. And then I took sherry and lime juice and I used like a spritzer and I spritzed the plate, which seasoned the fish, seasoned the broth to add the acidity. But because that butterfly pea flour, the moment you change the pH level of the the liquid, it turns to purple. So if you guys have seen that gin that turns from blue to purple, that's the
Yes.
chemical reaction you're going for. So as I sprayed it, the color of the plate, that broth started changing from blue to this nice violet purple color. It was awesome. And it looked and tasted great. Um, After that, I did like a Japanese French scallop. So I bought these huge scallops, seared them. I sous vide leeks with some butter. I burnt a bunch of leeks and made like an ash, so you get that like bitterness
Mhm.
out of it. I made a sake brown butter sauce. There was pistachios, yuzu, and pickled red chili on it. That was phenomenal. I did a Moroccan lamb loin where I sous vide the lamb loin with a bunch of Moroccan spices. I did a couscous with carrots. So I cut carrots insanely small, like you would a couscous, and folded in some mint and some honey into there. And then I made a ravioli that was filled with the sauce that was to dress the plate. So I reduced the sauce down really, really deep. It got
Right.
nice and thick and gelatinous. And then I made a ravioli. And when you boil it, the sauce melts in the ravioli. And when you cut the ravioli open, it sauces your plate. So that
It's like
was,
it's like the egg yolk ravioli without the egg yolk. You
it's
just follow the same
exactly.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then for the main course, I did one of the dishes that I'm kind of known for, which was a cocoa and spice crusted beef fillet, and it's with a creamed espresso demi. So you have coffee, you have chocolate, you have a bunch of spices like star anise and cinnamon and nutmeg and cloves. And then I made this like wild mushroom fricassee with some dried fruit. So the bitterness that comes from that sauce and from the beef, that
Yeah.
the dried fruit really helps with the sweetness, but then you get that earthy notes from the mushrooms. And then I made like a roasted garlic 14-hour 1,000 layer potato type thing, I call it. So it has all these layers of potato, and then you cook it for 14 hours, and then you fry it really fast. And then for dessert, I did what I called flavors of cashew. So it was cashew a bunch of different ways. So I did a lemon curd, a Calabo dark chocolate and cashew pate. Um, there was a cashew shortbread crumble. There was honey maple candied cashews and a caramelized honey cashew milk on the plate. And then there was a cashew brittle that I made. So, and then some fresh raspberries. So it was just this nice rounded out meal, but it was big and it was extravagant, but it was really nice.
My lack of comments is to do with the fact that I have nothing to contribute to this conversation. It's like and there's a reason why I asked you this question. It's a long-winded question, it's all of these things, but I wanted to highlight to what extent you are a chef and to what extent you have to plan out from start to finish the progression of a meal.
Yeah.
How one element applies to another. The fact that you had to associate an Icelandic fish to associate with a memory, and then looking at pH balances and things like that, right? So I think all of this, a lot of people don't understand that these are things that all have to apply to the application of an investment. You
Yes.
have to be able to measure all of these things and be able to predict all of these things, and then be able to predict how a customer is going to respond to a small, slight little change. Everyone talks about the lean method. Sure, you go test, but you also kind of have to know, like, okay, this is what's going to happen. So, I mean, that's what I wanted to highlight, that it's so fascinating that you can think these things through because a lot of people can't. I couldn't for the longest amount of time. It was just kind of like throwing money at a problem and seeing, hey, is this going to return or not?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people get caught um in a web of that, in a way. But
Yeah,
it's one of those things that people like, oh, like you can do this, not a lot of people can do this. I honestly think a lot of people can do this.
yeah,
It's a matter of just believing, but also fully
yeah,
ingraining yourself in that. Like it is a process. And that was the
yes,
one thing I learned from the time I first stepped foot in the kitchen at
yeah,
14 years old
yeah.
to now, is everything is a process, and everything you do has meaning. You don't just do something and it doesn't have meaning. Everything you do has a meaning and a place to the end. And I've taken that and built it into our VC portfolio.
So that's a perfect segue into what I want to talk about next is the VC portfolio, right? As a
Yeah.
family, you've got your holdings, you've got things that you're doing. Let's focus into where you're transitioning into. So a lot
Okay.
of family offices now, I lost count the number of family offices that are going from traditional allocators to now money managers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then in the fund that you're launching that is going to be VC focused, what has been your family's investment thesis up to this point? And then is that at all changing as you go into the more managed portfolio?
So our family's thesis in investing, it's something that we talk about investing in paradigm shifts. So and to us, a paradigm shift is revolutionary change in an industry. Um, a company, a founder trying to create a 180 to flip an industry on its head. So we're looking at companies that are looking to make that fundamental change. We
Yeah.
do not look for, incremental change. And that's the one thing that when I was setting up our guidelines and the way we look
Yeah.
at things, it was like, if this is an incremental change, we don't want to play. We're pretty risky investors. We know what we can bring and the value we can bring to these
Yeah.
companies. Let's look at the outliers. Um, that is not going to change within our fund, and I think that's something that we're going to be very um, focused on. Is that we want to make sure that we're bringing what has made us successful up to this point
Yeah.
to our LPs, right? If someone is going to invest in us, they're investing on us based on our track record and what we've done up until this point. So why would we, when we get their capital, then pivot and change, right? Let's
Right.
let's stay
Right.
true to who we are, how we've done things, because it has
Yeah.
worked
Mhm.
so far. So we're really focused in on that.
Okay. What are some of, let's call it, the highlights of your investment criteria? Because what is
Um,
going to happen is a lot of
yeah.
people, will see this, and sometimes it'll be founders, and they're going to say, "Oh, look, Craig D Cruze, I'm going to go and hit him up." Okay, well, what should they not waste your time with?
Um, don't waste my time with incremental change. Um, I would say be confident. The one thing we look for, so I'll give you we've created a thing that we call the four pillars, though, how we invest.
Mhm.
So the number one thing that we look at when we first are, presented a company or a
Yeah.
founder comes and talks to us is this company a paradigm shift? Just what I
Right.
explained earlier, right?
Mhm.
The second thing we ask is, what can we bring to the table? That's one of the things is, are we able to help? Other than a
Right.
check, everyone goes, well, you can deploy capital. Yeah, that's great. But what can we bring to the table? What, as Inverted Ventures, what is Craig D Cruze? What is Nick Rodriguez, Shane Rodriguez? What can we bring to the table that can help this company scale? That can
Right.
almost de-risk our investment in a way where we can say, okay, yeah, we can introduce you to other investors. Again, that's great, but anyone can do that. What can we do? Operational outlook of things. It's the
Yeah.
sales processes that we can help build. So that's what we really look at. How do we help from an operational standpoint? The third thing
Your
we look at, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just
Oh,
observing that I think you're referring to something that's within your organization. What's a force multiplier almost?
yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, great way of putting it. Um, the third pillar that we use is um, the team. Like I said, I think a few minutes ago, team is so big to us. Who is this team? How do
Right.
we work with this team? Can we have a beer with this team? Can we just do this like you and I saw, just having a
Yeah.
conversation and not talk about business all the time? How's your
Yeah.
family? How's things going? Where are we going on vacation this year? Are you
Right.
going on vacation this year? Like those types of things, right? Like, how are you as a person? I want to get to know people and I want people to know us. We're
Yeah.
very emotions on our sleeve, open book type of people.
Mhm.
You ask us anything, we'll answer. Nothing's off limits. And I think you got that from our first conversation the first time we met. It was just like, yeah, like this is who we are. To a fault,
Oh,
maybe, but that's just
I
who we are.
asked you so many questions, and to your credit, you and Jair were just so open and etc. Because it's just my nature, right? Like all I do now is try to get to know family offices. So I
Yeah.
tend to sometimes just ask a lot of questions to a point where sometimes I probably need to learn how to stop.
But I
But
love
it's
it. Being inquisitive is like fundamental, I think, right? And
yeah,
like you said, this
yeah,
is who you're trying to meet, and it's who you are. Don't change who
right,
you are, man. Like that's I love that, right? And then
yeah,
our fourth pillar is valuation metrics, right?
mhm,
What does this investment look like? So, one of the things a lot of people in Western Canada, especially a lot of investors, that's like
yeah,
the first thing they look at is, okay, what's
yeah,
the valuation? What's your revenue? What are you valuing the company at? Let me figure
yeah,
out that ratio and we're going
yeah,
to either decide to invest or not. That's the last thing we look at in our
mhm,
process in terms of the four
right,
pillars because that's important, but it
yes,
sure is not the most important thing that we look for.
interesting. So some tangibles, because you mentioned a lot of intangibles. So some tangibles when it comes to a criteria would be something along the lines of, hey, what stage are you coming in at usually? Are you
Okay.
lead in the investment or are you usually following? Those are types of some of the things I would also like to know.
Yes. So in terms of stage, we uh, currently live in the seed stage. So we try and enter in the seed stage of a company. We do follow along in follow-up rounds, whether they be bridges, Series A's, B's,
Yeah.
things like that. We always save capital for our winners. Um, we sorry, what was the other question, Seth?
The where you first check in.
Oh, first check-in. Yeah, so we are first check-in,
Mhm.
um, not a lot of the times, but I would say the majority of the times for some of our investments,
I'm
because
assuming you take a board seat as well for the companies that you invest into.
certain ones, yes. Certain
Okay.
certain ones. We're not actively, I would say we're not actively looking for board seats. We get asked to be on a lot of boards based on
Yeah.
our expertise in the companies that we're, investing in.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily want to lead rounds. We
Yeah.
inevitably do with just
Yeah.
the size of checks that we write, but also
Right.
with um, the people that we've made those relationships with. They want us to be the ones creating the term sheet. The one thing that we're trying to build is we want inverted ventures. We want to be known as fair, honest,
Right.
truthful. Um,
Mhm.
if someone sees inverted ventures on a cap table, they know there's going to be no funny business. No one's going to get
Right.
screwed. If we
Right.
ask for a side letter or some sort of side deal, we want it to be everybody. I'd rather not have a
Yeah.
side letter. Let's just work it into the
Yeah.
agreement. Everybody needs to. We're all working together to make this company successful as investors.
Yeah.
Let's all get the same thing together, and
Yeah.
same thing with the founders. So when we look at that, in terms of in terms of sizing, entry point, first check in, we are, a lot of the times second or third money in. We don't like to be last money in. We don't really
Right.
make that a contingency. We don't think
Yes.
that's helpful because everyone wants to be last money in, so no one's first money in, and then the
Yeah.
companies just fail. So
Yeah.
if we could be that capital that can push them forward and then
Yeah.
get some other people to come in and follow along, great.
Very interesting. So if you're, in that position where you just sort of inevitably be first or second or early check in, let's call it, and
Yes.
if you're inevitably joining boards or adding value add, I'm curious as to, what kind of responsibilities do you consider of having as a board member or as an investor? Do founders tell you, okay, these are the things that I expect from you, or do you find that you have to interject and say, okay, these are the things where we should add some value?
It's a little bit of both, I would say. There are some founders that have never run a board meeting or never
Yeah,
had a board meeting, right? So
yeah,
because we have that experience now, we're able to interject and give some guidance. I would say that, we try and do both. We try and say, learn, do your thing, and we'll guide as we
yeah,
can. The value we try and bring is how do we help the company um, in all aspects become better, right? So from a board level, from a operations level, from a um, sales level, whatever it might be. So that's I don't know if I'm answering your question right, but we're
you are.
we're okay because that's how we interject ourselves by we're very active investors, and
Right.
we tell that to the founders from the moment we talk to them is so I guess one thing, that you mentioned was like, what's something don't waste our time with? Um, if you want a passive investor, if you want someone that's just going to sit back, write a check, and then wait for the exit and not really talk to you and just wait for their quarterly updates, that is not us. We are um, talking, and it's not to the point of annoyance because it's not, again, what's the business like? Did you sell? Did you sell? Did you
Mhm.
sell? No, no, it's we're talking on a bi-weekly basis. Like I talk to every one of our founders on a bi-weekly, if not weekly basis. And it's a 3-minute conversation over text or something. It's not this inherently long conversation, but that's what we
Mhm.
expect. The one thing we write into all of our term sheets is we want monthly updates.
Mhm.
And that's for the benefit of all the investors that's the benefit for the founder as well, to get into that groove, to get into that rotation of communication is key. There might be a time where I'm on holiday or I'm busy with something else and fighting another fire or whatever it is, and maybe we don't talk for a month. Give me a broad 2 paragraph update of what's
Yeah.
going on, and we'll touch base on it. I don't want to get the quarterly update when if something's wrong. Well, it's too
Mm,
late. 2 months have already
mm.
gone by. Like,
Yes.
our the relationship should be, tell me when things are going great, but I really want to know when things are about to go sour, because we
Right.
might be able to help you turn that ship around. But if it's too late, then we're all just running around like chickens with our heads cut off.
Yeah.
Let's work together. We are in a relationship. You are in
Yeah.
a marriage at this point. So
100%.
let's talk through these problems before they
Yeah.
become a monster problem, and
Yeah.
then everything runs smooth as can be.
So, on the topic of marriage, what's what would you say would be the equivalent in this space to marriage counseling?
Ooh, it would be the open lines of communication is probably the biggest, right?
No, but I mean,
And
like
that
when something becomes, contested, when something becomes an issue where there's some sort of a disagreement between the founding team and the investors. So, what then acts as the mediator or the problem solver in that situation?
um, it's a great question. I would hope that we make the right decision. Like, we've come across this before, and it's
Right.
never been a big issue, because I believe we make the right decisions when we invest in founders, because we are investing in the people first. Where we can have an adult conversation, where if we
Yeah.
don't agree to something, we're not going to yell and scream and, stomp our feet and cry in the grocery store. We're gonna convey our, whether it be
Right.
disappointment or concern,
Hmm.
and at the end of the day, it's their business, and we own a
Yeah.
very small percentage of said business.
Yeah.
So we just need to know that we have that relationship, that we can voice our concern, that we
Hmm.
can voice our disappointment and say,
Hmm.
okay, what are we doing in this situation? Because
Hmm.
we don't necessarily like this. And if they
Yeah.
say it's all good, everything's fine, we will not push it to the point of souring the
Hmm.
relationship, but we will
Yeah.
keep a close eye on it and have the weekly follow-ups and go
Yes.
through. And then we can at least be there when, if we believe the wheels are going to come off the bus, we're at least there with a tire iron trying to tighten them up, and then say, look, this wheel's coming off. Can we talk about this as mature adults? And that has
Yeah, for
worked
sure.
time and time again for us, where if you come in as the bully or the loud person that's just, you know, pounding, that never works. It doesn't work in any relationship in your life. Why would it work in this world, right?
Wait, it doesn't work in any relationship in your life? Is that what you're telling me?
I've tried it with my daughter. It doesn't work at all.
So, while you were talking, it reminded me of something very interesting. So, a lot of family offices are now going into venture or going into real estate development or private credit, things that they weren't doing before. They were allocators in, they're now becoming the general partners in. And people that are raising capital, whether it's founders, whether it's managers, they're starting to realize this now. They're starting to see this trend. So then the question is, founders have a decision to make. They go with a traditional VC versus a family office VC. A lot of people are now saying, hey, I don't want a traditional VC. I want to raise money from family offices. So what do you think is the main difference between the two?
Honestly, the main difference I see is the family aspect. Is that, in a way, if within a family office, especially our family office, there's a lot of family offices where, and I mean, you understand this side, is that you're managing your family's assets,
Yeah.
right? That you're not some CEO that's hired in by, your dad, your uncle, whatever, and they understand the dynamic and then they're deploying.
Yeah.
We understand the dynamic to a fault,
Right.
but we all have to work together, which working with family can be very tough. There's a reason why I was chosen. There's 23 other cousins in our family, and there's MBAs and there's CPAs and CGAs, and they picked the dumb cook to come in and do this, right? And it's because we can it's because we can work together. We
Right.
have that thing where we can work together. Business is business. Believe me, business is business, but family is family. And I think that people, investor or sorry, founders, when they're looking for that investment, they want that type of dynamic where you understand each other. They You're not getting the traditional VC questions. You're not getting the traditional VC follow up or the that type of thing. I hope that's what helps us because we're proving that we're trying to every day.
I appreciate the self-deprecating humor.
Hey man, I know what like I thought. I was just like, what? Like it doesn't make sense. Like when I tell people the story, if I'm at a conference or whatever, and they're like, how are you? And then it's almost a sometimes a oh, because you're the family. And I'm like, no, no, no. I get it. It could look that way, right? It could look that way huge. Oh, I'm the only cousin. Sure, let's bring him on, even though all he does is cook. But it's like, no, we have insanely smart people in our family that have gone to multiple stages of university and
Yes.
post-secondary and have titles and letters after their name and all that kind of stuff. And they're not involved because they wouldn't be the right fit in the dynamic of what we're trying to accomplish here.
There's a family office that we met here in Toronto recently, and what he explained to me is the following. He said, "In our family, we've got a lot of MBAs. You know, they went to Queens and Schulich and all these places, and they said we started ventures together, and very quickly we learned that too many cooks in the kitchen is a problem, especially with too many smart minds. You know, people who do MBAs and formal training in these things, generally you're taught in school to try to find the errors in every situation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like your job as an MBA or CPA is to do the breakdown of, okay, what is wrong with this? And so they said that their first venture failed as a family, is because everyone went into a venture and said, these are all the things that are wrong, and these are the things that we have to financially fix. Where they got better is they said, okay, we're not going to have this anymore. We're going to have one person taking the lead, another person who's the second. The second has the ability to express their opinions to the lead, but they're trusting the lead in that situation to make a decision, and the rest of the family follows with their capital. And then
Okay.
for the next deal, they have another lead that they've appointed so that there's no conflict of interest. There's no sort of like favoritism or anything like that. But there's always one leader with one second in hand that can say, okay, maybe you should look at it this way, and et cetera, et cetera. So that trust level is there. And I think that that's very important.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
Let's go into some of the lighter stuff.
sure.
You know, the lighter stuff that nobody worries about. What do you hate about founders?
Ooh. Wow, that's a tough one. What do I hate? You know what? I honestly don't hate anything about founders, to be very honest, because I
Yep.
understand the grind. Right. And I'm annoyed by founders, right? You get annoyed by the constant like emails and the like, hey, following up again for the 40th time. Okay, did you not get the hint, right? And it's like, I already sent you 14 emails ago that I'm not interested. Why am I
Yeah.
still on your mailing list or whatever it might be? But I respect the grind. So I would say there's nothing that I actively hate. There's annoyances. Again, there's the overvaluing of companies where you're like,
Yes.
I've got $10,000 of annual sales and my company's worth $7 million. Well, no,
Oh, yeah.
but but I love what I do, and this company's going to be amazing. Great, it's going to be amazing, but it's not worth 7 million today. Those
Yeah. I mean,
things, but again, those are things that they're going to learn through the journey by hearing it enough by people like us
yes.
that are going
Mhm.
to tell them, okay, you gotta, and that's the guidance thing. The one thing that I don't have time for, I would say, with certain founders are the ones that just don't listen. You've
Mhm.
talked to them, you've given your nuggets. I'm of the ilk that'll give advice when someone asks for advice. We don't have to be on the cap table or going to invest. No, if you need a connection, even if we're not invested, I will give you that connection. That's who we are. That's what we want to be.
Mhm.
But when you give the advice and then you talk to them a few months later and you see their growth pattern and they haven't taken it, and then they ask you again. So in any tidbits of advice, you're like, okay, this is your spiel now. It's not who you are.
Yes.
This is just what you're trying to make it out to be. That
Yeah.
annoys me.
Yeah.
Um, to answer your question, I guess.
Okay, so I tried to set you up for that one. I really wanted a genuine answer, which I think I got. Okay, so how about this one?
Yeah. Okay.
Tell me how you feel about the following statement. I'm a founder, I'm pitching you, okay? And I
Yep.
say this is a $50 billion industry, and if we only captured 1% of it, dot dot dot.
Okay. I hate that. That's the one thing on pitch decks that I do actually. I look at the Tam Sam BS stuff and I just
Yeah.
whatever. And it's so funny because sometimes you'll see some where the TAM is actually relatively small because they've dialed it down. And I'm like, oh,
Yes.
you're being realistic about it. And then you see other VCs, which might be the more traditional, that are going,
Yeah.
oh, your TAM's way too small. I can't invest. If your TAM's not 50 billion or more, we're not investing. And I'm like, to get 1% of that, like, come on, right? Like, yeah, that does annoy me a lot where, and that's where we have the conversations of, okay,
Yeah.
okay, I get what you're getting at. What do you think you can capture in the next 24 months?
Right.
Give me a number, right? And not off of the pro forma statement that you have with the charts and the bars and all that stuff. Like
Yeah.
realistically, where and
Right.
tell me how you get there, right? And then give me a 5 year. And then that's where it's like, okay, so do you still think you're going to get to that 1%, right?
Tell
And
me how you get there. That's the part that's a big one for me. My biggest ick when it comes to looking at pitch decks or even just hearing a pitch is, you know, market size is X, but if we capture just 1% of it, we would make this much money. My thing is, you know, the earth is this big. If I just, bought 1% of it, I would be this rich. The question is,
yeah,
how do you get there? What are you doing differently than what you're doing today that gets you to that? And right, and that's I wish that people would answer that question a lot more.
yeah,
Um,
that's a great
okay,
and that's great. Yeah, because that's what we ask. Because the one thing I've asked too when they say, you know, 1%, I go,
right,
okay, that's 1/100th of this massive industry.
right,
Do you understand how big this industry is? I know you have a number there and you have this big ball or whatever pie chart thing.
yes.
1/100th of this. I love your analogy of the Earth. If you were to capture 1/100th of the Earth, like, do you understand how vast that is? Right. So if you told me I'm trying to capture 0.01%, is that more realistic than 1%, 1/100th of this massive industry that you're saying you're going to operate in? So I love that analogy of the Earth. I'm going to use that from now
Well, I just came up with it, so okay.
on.
Uh, I don't own it. Okay, so here's another one. When you go from the market slide to the competition slide, and you see that inevitable graph, right? And then you see at the top right hand corner the logo of the company that you're presenting. I do it too. Don't get me wrong. I do it
Yeah.
too. Right. What are you thinking at that moment?
I'm looking at the X and Y axis to say what are they trying to tell me? Like what are the,
Right.
where is it? Because it's always at the top right.
Yes.
I actually saw one last week that was at the bottom left.
Oh,
It
okay.
was at the bottom left, but it made sense. And they're like, this is a flip around. And they knew what they were doing, and it was great. Um, I a lot of the times don't take a lot of that to heart. And I know it's like just standard form for pitch decks.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't take any of that to heart. Again, show me. Like my uncle Shane, he always tells us, right? Guys, I'm from Missouri. I'm from the show me state, right? Show me. Don't tell me what you're gonna do. I hate hearing your words. Show me what you've done. Show me like results. So that's what I try and do with our founders. Like you can tell me that you're at the top right. Well, show me how you're different than all of your competitors. Like
Yeah.
show me the inherent data of customers that you've taken from them, from sales practices that you have, from everything that you're doing. What
Right.
actually makes you different?
We're getting close to the time. So what I would like to do is spend a little bit of time just briefly highlighting some of the deals that you've done.
Sure.
One of them that I remember is Home Team because you told us a lot about Home Team. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The other one is the kinetic company, the one with the soles.
Oh yeah, yeah. So the Victory it's called. So they have yeah, so they it's insoles for athletic shoes, athletic insoles. And what it does is it actually stores kinetic energy as your foot is, say, curved. So say
Right.
you're ready to push off if you're running a race or you're playing football, or even if you're on a basketball court and you step, it stores the kinetic energy to help boost. It gives you a little bit of a spring. I'm not going to say you're going to turn into Michael Jordan. They're not going to say that, but it helps. And
It's like
actually,
the Black Panther suit.
yeah, it's got a little bit of stuff going on. And then we
Yeah.
have another. So with them, when we first invested with them, they had I think $4 million in sales, and this was about 2 years ago, I would
Okay.
say. We just got an update from them that they closed 2023 with $19.9 million in sales.
Oh wow.
So this company is doing well. Their athletes are coming aboard in droves,
Yes.
and saying, yeah, this is helpful. It's helping me with the bone spurs and my ankle issues and whatever it might be. So doing great. Another company we have on the material sciences front is called Monarch, out of New York State, and
I
Monarch
remember these
has been
guys. Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
What they do is the first, or the ideation of this company was to create an insert for a bulletproof vest. They take
Mhm.
multiple layers of textiles, whether it be gels, carbon fiber, um, foams, and they make what they call a sandwich layer of three or more layers. And
Mhm.
what it does is, right now, when a bullet hits a bulletproof vest, there's a steel plate in the front. You have an empty pocket inside against your chest that you can add what is now really just foam.
Mhm.
And then as the plate indents, the bullet hits the plate indents, that kinetic energy actually goes through your body. So that's where the broken ribs, the internal bleeding. So for police officers, when they get shot in the bulletproof vest, they're off work for almost 4 weeks because they're filling out paperwork, and you got to just make sure that everything's okay on the inside. Um, with Monarch's product, called Dark Matter, it actually dissipates the energy. So the energy radiates. That indentation from the bullet and the plate will actually hit this sandwich, the gel layers, and radiate around your body. So they've done multiple tests, of which it has a minimum 92% reduction of energy just from a normal, let's say, Glock 6 handgun bullet, which is the majority of what is, say, shot at to cops and whatever. So that's the difference between a police officer, you know, either life or death. It's the peace of mind of their family. And then you go into military, things like that. But the other aspects of this company now are sports, right? You look at knee pads, elbow pads, helmets. Can't really say helmets because you can't really stop concussions, but anything with vibration, it will
Yes.
dissipate that energy. So when you look at driving NASCAR, right, the roll bars and all that kind of stuff, if you can pad the seats with this and stop that vibration or minimize it by 50%, that's the
Mhm.
difference between winning a race and coming in third. So
For sure.
um, there's lots of uses for this, medical, everything. So they're closing a $30 million Series A, right, or sorry, a $7 million, $30 million valuation Series A right now. We got into the company at a 5 million valuation, so just a phenomenal company, lots of growth, and they're working with the army and military and other governments around the world because their product actually does make a huge difference.
So, do you want to talk about home team at all, or do you want to move on?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would love to talk about Home Team. So, Home Team Live is a live streaming sports platform for minor league sports. What they do is they set up 4 HDK cameras at a venue. So whether it be at your local community center where you play, ball hockey, or at the local soccer dome where there's 6 or 7 fields, they'll set up cameras at each field. Um, it uses tracking technology to track, the camera will track the flow of people,
Right.
um, and they're in hundreds of venues right now within Canada and the US. The one big great thing that they're doing right now is they're working with so a monster flag football league that is going to, sorry, USA Football. I can actually say it now. USA Football is they're working with them to get into 5,000 venues. And this is going to change how we watch sports. What sold us on it was, I travel a lot for work. If I want to watch my daughter's volleyball game or her soccer game, that wasn't really an option now. There is competition out there, but they actually just plug into the security cameras that are in the building. So you're getting that grainy kind of not so
Yeah.
great footage. It lags, all that kind of stuff. This is like watching TSN on your phone, right? Or watching ESPN on your phone. The other part of it that's great, they showed us when we first got presented the product, they showed us where one game was being watched. And it was like, Saskatchewan, because that's where the game was being played. And then it was Alberta. And then there was Afghanistan. And I'm like, Afghanistan? Like, who's watching in Afghanistan? And he's like, oh, military. This is probably a military parent. And I went, boom, you've just pulled on the heartstrings of every parent, grandparent, auntie, uncle that lives away. Now you have that method. The one thing I love about the company is their rev sharing models.
Mm.
So for these sports leagues and for these neighborhood groups, things like that, right? Community centers, they're actually offering 3 revenue streams to these leagues that they've never had before. So how do you
Right.
upgrade your facilities? Well, through Home Team Live, right?
Right.
If you, get the camera, once you've paid back the cost of the camera, they share the rev, 70/30 with the venues. Then there's a streaming fee of $14.99 per month. Well, 70/30 is shared out of that. So inherently, the venues become the number one sales agent for Home Team Live. They don't need an actual sales department. They have every venue going, we're going to sell every parent that registers their child for soccer, hockey, whatever it is, because
Yeah.
we're going to get a 30% cut right off the top. Right.
That's
And
pretty
then
awesome.
there's the ad revenue, right?
Right.
So the ad revenue comes in where the local Subway or the local pizza joint goes, hey, I would love to showcase on this because I know that you have this many people watching. And the thing is, when people watch online videos, so say YouTube, things like that, your average watch time is about 15 seconds. That's what they figured out. And people
Yeah.
are paying ad revenue on 15-second watch times. Home Team Lives is 9 minutes and 34 seconds of average watch time. So the
Wow.
multiple, because people are actively locked in, right? You are watching your daughter's soccer game. You are watching her volleyball game.
Yes.
Grandma is watching her grandson play hockey, right? So
Yeah.
um, those ads mean so much more in terms of value because there are
Right.
so many eyes on this product. So the this company has been amazing. We got in again at a 5 million valuation. They're just actually closing a bridge right now. That's going to value them at $20 million.
Wow.
Yeah, and their revenues are, when we first got involved, they were doing 200,000 a year in revenue. They just did 1.6 last year, and they're looking to do about 5 this year.
I find it so fascinating because all the betting apps are now looking for more opportunities and more sporting events because they've run out of all the traditional sporting events.
Yes,
Have they sort of had that contact yet?
huge. So the sports betting community, the big companies in the States, the ones that we can all name, are talking to them because they need content, right? So right now, the focus was under 18. Can't gamble on that, obviously. Well, with this USA football deal and with all these other things that are coming up, um, 18 plus, semi pro
Yeah.
is coming on the forefront. And you're not going to be able to watch it on ESPN, the Ocho, or whatever it might be. You're going to be able to watch it on Home Team Live now, to the point
Wow.
where um, Home Team Live beat out NBC Sports for the USA football contract for their summer games last year, and Home Team blew it out of the water, and that's how this
Yeah.
deal came to be. So they've taken NBC Sports and this small tiny company from Regina, Saskatchewan, beat them out. They've beat out TSN for the World Little League Championships that are happening in, I believe, Mississauga, things like that, right? So there's all these different things that are coming, these different levers that are being pulled with them. But the sports betting, I think, is one of the most exciting pieces because they're looking for content. Because, like you said, the traditional sports have been tapped. So now it's okay, what else can we bet on? And home team can offer that.
Oh yeah. If there's ever never a shortage of anything, is gamblers looking for things to gamble. You watch
Very true.
you watch The Office, right?
Yes.
Do
Yeah.
you remember Kevin's like obsession with gambling and betting on everything?
On everything. Yeah. That was great. Yeah.
So
I love that.
we are close to the time. I think we should wrap up here. I asked
For
you
sure.
these questions about the portfolio companies because you mentioned that you're looking for paradigm shifts, right? I
Yes.
wanted an example of what these paradigm shifts look like. You know,
Okay.
the technology behind Black Panther's Wakanda suit and like things like that. I think is fascinating. Changing the way people look at watching their kids play or watching their family members play in little leagues and things like that. So it's pretty fascinating. Last question for you as we wrap up.
All
You
right.
are now shifting into what is a formal venture fund, right? You're going to be now managing outside capital, maybe that of other family offices, wealth managers, etc.
Mhm.
Maybe this is so your response, I would say maybe focus it towards those future LPs. What is to come in the future, and what are they expecting as an investor with you?
I would say the future for inverted looks like we're going to double down on what we've done. We're going to take that track record that we have of these
Mhm.
multiples and grow that. And we're going to be able to utilize, um, this outside capital to the point
Yeah.
where we're doing this because we're offering people within our network from, say, oil and gas and VC that want
Mhm.
access to our portfolio that we got in relatively early with.
Yes.
We are going to offer certain deals into the fund as a warehouse. That's going to grow. You're going to get the benefit of that at our entry cost. But we're going to take capital and be able to grow it and
Right.
explode these companies because at certain levels at a series A, if home team does a 50-70 million dollar series A, well, we probably wouldn't be able to play at that point.
Mhm.
We would, but at a small level. Well, now we've built these relationships. We have the pro rata rights. We have these things. This is what the LPs can expect is that we're going to leverage everything that we've built in the last 3 years and be able to offer that to every LP. We are going to grow capital at the rate that we've grown capital already within our existing portfolio. We're going to do that, but on mock speed with outside capital.
Yeah, and that's actually a very good point. That's part of the reason why our focus has mainly shifted towards family offices. As I mentioned earlier on, that as more family offices are doing deals now where they're bringing in co-investors, look, there's this inherent sort of fit between family offices. It's like you're investing your own money, we're investing our own money. There's skin in the game, real skin in the game, and so we trust that money with you as opposed to somebody else who's managing outside capital with a, I don't know, like a 2 or 4% GP stake or something. Like that doesn't really equate in terms of skin in the game. So no,
Exactly.
makes perfect sense. Awesome. Thank you